Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. It's great to have you all with us. The violence in Mali seems to rage stronger and stronger despite the efforts of international peacekeeping forces. Last week, a village called Sobenda was attacked and 95 people were killed. On the heels of that came another attack earlier where 135 people were killed. Now, the first village that we talked about was part of the Dogon people in Mali, and the other village was part of the Fulani group, which has itself been targeted by Dogon attacks recently and vowed revenge. People think that's the reason behind all this. It's possible that this attack on Sobenda was an act of vengeance, or it could be something else. The president of Mali, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, visited the graves of victims and held this short speech.
Sûr qu'il y a quelque chose de totalement anormal. Cette société malienne, singulièrement celle du centre du Mali, et la
There
relation
is something very abnormal happening. This Malian society in the center of Mali, the relations between the communities we are talking about today with a lot of presuppositions, the Dogon and the Pule, have always lived in perfect harmony. And all those who today come out with suspicious theses on the interethnic conflict need to revise their copy. In any case, they should not throw oil on the fire. There is no interethnic conflict. I say this very clearly. There is an increase of what we saw in the North and what we continue to live in the North, which is looking to put on a mask, but they won't surprise us because we know what it is about. And from the moment we know about a problem, the solution is very close.
ainsi trouver à se mettre un masque, mais qui ne nous surprendra pas, car nous savons de quoi il s'agit. Et dès lors que l'on sait un problème, la solution est déjà toute proche, Inch'Allah.
So why is Mali breaking down into this violence then? Is it just another intra-ethnic conflict or a religious conflict? Or are there foreign interests at play here? And what the president said, how does that come into effect with all of this? Well, to discuss all this with us today is Baba Ai. Baba Ai is Policy Officer for the Health and Social Service of Public Services International, a global trade union federation. He's also editor of The Socialist Worker in Nigeria and contributing editor of the Review of African Political Economy. And Baba, welcome. Good to have you with us here on The Real News.
Thank you very much for having me, Mac. Good day.
Good day. So you heard what the president of Mali said. And so give us your analysis of what's going on here and why, as I said to you earlier before we went on the air, in a conversation with a Dogon man that we know, saying there was never a historic conflict between the two people, between the Pule and the Dogon. So what's your analysis of what's going on here?
Well, thank you very much. I think it's much more complicated than to see it as an ethnic or religious conflict between the Fulani, or Fule as they called in that part of West Africa on one hand, and the Dogon and Bambara people on the other hand. What you have deeper economic, political, and environmental roots, because the semi-nomadic Fulani have lived in peace to a great extent with the other ethnic groups for centuries. And we're not talking only in Mali now. You have what you have is a situation that is sharpest in Mali and Nigeria, but that you have had sparks of across in Burkina Faso, in Ghana, and so on and so forth. Because the Fulani, the largest semi-nomadic ethnic group in the world, with almost 40 million population, spread across almost the whole of West Africa, from Senegal down to Chad and into Central Africa, or the Central African Republic. And they have lived in harmony with pastorally, with farmers. They are mainly pastoralists, as semi-nomads. But now, what are the issues at stake, and how have this led to such crisis as we're seeing now, and the sharpening of conflict between these groups? I'll start from the environmental question, and that is partly, you have had more clashes between pastoralists with the grazing of their animals and farmers, as this is to drive home the fact that the climate crisis is real. It's not a joking matter, like in the Lake Chad, that you have the lake being less than a tenth of what it was just some 60 years back. And so these contributed to exacerbating situations. But the the sharpening of it also with the politics. In 2012, the rebellion, the separatist politics of Tuareg, moving down from the south, from the north southwards down to towards Bamako, contributed to what we're having now as a kind of vicious circle. And how is this? Is that the Dogon have been made to see the Fulanis have been supportive of the jihadists, partly also by a government that surreptitiously does this in not being able to curtail the rampaging of the separationist forces, particularly between 2012 and 2015. So you have the Dogon organizing to fight back against what started, you could say, as a supposed involvement of Fulani with the jihadists. But this also provided room for recruitment. You know, it's like what you have at an earlier phase of Boko Haram in Nigeria, where the way and manner the insurgents were taken on, you know, provided incentive for otherwise would not have been interested youths to get recruited.
So I'm kind of going to look at the context of what you were saying here. I mean, you know, when you think of this conflict, in many ways, it was in 2013 when Francois Hollande, who was then the leader of France in opposition to Cheval, sent troops in 2013, 2014, and thousands of troops went in, and then German troops went in and joined these operations, and so so over this years of European deployment in Mali, and you had this kind of coupled with the attacks at Sobanda, and coupled with what you were describing as the environmental disaster that's taking place throughout West Africa right now, which is exacerbating conditions. People are desperate. So how do these things feed into each other? What is it? Why do you think the Europeans are sending in so many troops at this point to West Africa, and in these portions of West Africa, like Mali? And what do you think is really going on here?
You see, I was coming to that. You see, the coming in particularly of France, which with its France-Afrique policy, as one of the brashest frameworks of neo-colonial relations with its ex-colonies, is simply for the resources of Mali, particularly uranium, which you have large resources in Mali and in Niger, and don't forget the electricity in France is some 70% through nuclear energy.
And Mali has lots of uranium.
Exactly, you know, and so that's why you have France playing such a role. But this has only exacerbated the situation there in so many ways, because it has rather contributed to helping to fill the ranks of the insurgents with young men that feel that the French are coming in, as they've always been doing, to despoil the land, to take up their resources, and so on and so forth. So you have a vicious circle there. And the Fulabo geographically, in terms of where those of them in villages are in Mali, are closer to, you know, the front lines of the war with between the secessionists and the government in Bamako. And so
you're talking about the Tuareg secessionist movement.
The Tuareg, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So all this contributes to the perception that then feeds into sharpening of conflicts between the Dogon and the Fulani.
Could you talk a bit about? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's not just an ethnic issue that is important to stress. So, it's not strictly ethnic conflict.
Just for a minute, I want to explore two quick things before we have to end. One it has to do with the Malian government itself, and your analysis of that government, who they are, what they are, and they seem to have they cannot seem to control either the war with the Tuaregs or the outbursts of violence that are taking place. And there have been lots of reports of Malian troops inflicting torture and abusing people, especially among the Fulani. So talk about what's the internal dynamic here? What is this Malian government?
One, first and foremost, as I said, the Franc-Afrique politics is very strong. The Malian government, in a sense, sees its allegiance to the mother country as of greater import than to its citizenry. I mean, it might talk to the contrary, but that is a simple fact of the strength of the umbilical cord it has in terms of being a new colony under France. And it is also a government that has been inept and that is, you will say, knock-kneed, that is unstable. You found this being aptly demonstrated in April when Prime Minister Maiga and his entire cabinet had to resign because they could find no answers to the spate of continued insurgency. So it's a weak government that has partly rested on militia forces, particularly from the Dogon. Even though both the government and the Dogon, in God we trust, militia both deny this, but this is a statement of facts from what you can see on the ground. So it relies on this to try give some semblance of being in charge. But that semblance of being in charge is at the cost of lives that are spilled by the militia. And then you have reprisal and you know, retaliatory attacks. And the circle goes on and on and on. So the government cannot address this, nor can it address the insurgency. It really has no answers to this, but it is just been propped up by the forces of the French and other European governments who have boots on the foot.
I mean, so to kind of conclude, I mean, what you're describing here is a situation where the Malian government cannot handle what's going on inside for all the complex reasons you put out there. The French and Germans, other European former colonialists, are there to kind of ensure that try to keep some stability because they need the mineral wealth inside of West Africa. And then you also, on top of that, have the disaster of climate change and the desertification of much of West Africa. So this is and that also feeds into the people fleeing to go to Europe and other places because they can't survive inside their own nations. So I just very quickly, where do you see this going? What can be done here?
Very good question. It's a worrisome situation.
Yeah.
The Mali has a rich working class history, and I think that this is a major challenge for the trade unions and the labor movement as a whole to provide alternative as much as they can, because failure to have this done could result into a descent into the abyss of a situation akin to Somalia, so to speak.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that, I mean, so long as uranium would keep being mined, imperialist forces really care less, you know. It's the extent to which an implosion could affect their economic interest that could lead them to try find some sort of Bonapartist solution to this, but which would not still be in the interest of the poor working masses of Mali.
Well, Baba, I thank you for your work and thank you for joining us today. Look forward to your continuing commentary with us on what's happening in Africa.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your work and being with us
It's
today.
my pleasure. Thank you, man. Cheers.
And I'm Mark Steiner here for the Real News Network. Thank you all for joining us. Take care.